Hey everyone, welcome back to your math class. In this lesson, I'm not going to be talking for too long. I am feeling a lot better, but I don't need to talk that much in today's lesson because it's mostly going to be a practice session for you guys. Sorry about the camera. I am sitting in the sun just because it's kind of nice to have some sun, but I know it's messing with the camera a little bit. So you guys don't really need to see me, so hopefully that won't be an issue. But yeah, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes now. We're going to talk about the plan, and then we'll dive right into our practice questions. So first things first, just the plan as we always do. We're just going to talk quickly about what we're going to cover today. So this video might end up being a lot shorter than the ones before it and probably many of the ones after it because today it's just practice questions. So there's a few practice questions on fractions, a few on decimals, a few on percentages, and then a couple of word problems at the end. And then there's 5 word problems for homework. So I was thinking I'll do more word problems in class and some practice questions on the homework, but this is the way the cards fell. So I think it's 8 practice questions for each: fractions, decimals, percentages. So 24 practice questions without any words, and then 2 word problems at the end of today's class. And then for homework, you've got 5 more word problems. So the thing with the word problems, just before I forget, is, or sorry, not with the word problem, but the word problems that are on the homework, is that I've given a full set of solutions. They're not particularly complicated problems, but I've given a full set of solutions to your teachers. So if you have any questions, you can confer with them to talk about, where you might have gone wrong, or if there's a mistake in the answer key, then I will accept full blame for that. But I've also supplied them with 2 copies of the homework. One that has no information on it whatsoever besides the questions, and one of them that puts just the final answer on the page. So I'm going to leave it up to your teachers there to decide which of those 2 copies they choose to hand out to you guys. But either way, they're going to be accessible to approach about the problems. And of course, I'm always here in the YouTube comments, on Instagram, on WhatsApp, whatever it is you need. But yeah, so those are not going to be anything that shows up in the PowerPoint. That's going to be stuff that's handed out to you in class. And you'll have 2 days to complete that. So you should be watching this on Tuesday, so you'll have until Thursday to finish that. And on Thursday, if you've got any questions about the homework, once you look at the answer key, maybe you got a different answer somewhere and you're not really sure why. Thursday is going to be your day for test review. So I'm going to have a short video telling you what to study, and then you're going to have the rest of class to actually just go ahead and study for the test, which will be next Tuesday. So that'll be your chance to ask questions as well. Now, I am going to sort out specific times for when I'm going to hold a review session. But I am off work next Monday, so I will definitely do it. I'll definitely do 2 sessions, one Monday morning or afternoon, depending on what kind of time works for you. Probably sometime in the morning, but I haven't nailed down exactly what time that'll be. And then one in the evening after school if you've got last minute questions before the test. So I'm not sure I'll be able to provide that as a resource for every test, but for this test for sure, because I know I'm off next Monday already, I'll be able to do that for you guys. So without further ado, let's jump into the practice questions. So you can take a few seconds to look at these. I'll give you a few seconds to pause, and then we will jump into the answers to these questions. All right, so here are the answers to the practice problems for fractions. So nothing too complicated for the most part. Some of them are very straightforward, like this one here. You've just got a straight multiplication of the 2 numerators and straight multiplication of the 2 denominators, and that's that. One thing to watch for when it comes time for the tests or the homework or anything like that is when you're dealing with fractions and you get answers, relating to fractions, be sure to reduce when possible. So I'm not sure there's a ton of that that's actually gone on here in these questions, but that's something I wanted to emphasize because it's not really being covered in these practice problems. That if you can reduce your final answer, that you get an answer of 2 over 4, reduce that down to 1/2, right? So just things like that. Now for some of these problems, you'll see I've taken a couple of different approaches. Normally for something like these kinds of questions with mixed numbers, like this one here, or this weird one where I've got an improper fraction first and a mixed number second, typically it's best if you like it just kind of helps you keep all the numbers straight if you turn everything into improper fractions. But what you can do is if you've got these mixed numbers, you can add the whole numbers together just like regular addition, just like 3 plus 2 is 5, right? So we've got the 3 plus 2 is 5. And then all you have to worry about is these relatively small fractions left over, right? 1/4 and 1/6. You can find the common denominator, multiplying by 3 for the first one and multiplying by 2 for the second one. And then you can do that addition of the fractions separately, right? So I've kind of broken this one up into, I've done the 3 plus the 2 as one step, that's the 5, and then I've done a common denominator. I found a common denominator for the 2 proper fractions that are left over, and then you just tack that onto the end. So that's one way to do it. The other way is to turn everything into a mixed number, or turn everything into an improper fraction, but then you can start to deal with some really big numbers. So if you have to find a common denominator, you don't want to be multiplying bigger numbers than you have to, right? So that's why this is a strategy that might be useful. Same thing over here with this problem, is if you were to turn the second term, this 12 1/4, into an improper fraction, you'd end up with 49 over 4, but then you'd have to find a common denominator. So that means you're multiplying a 56 by something and a 49 by something. You just get these huge numbers, and then it's hard to figure out how they reduce, and you leave yourself open to making mistakes in like the subtraction or whatever. So what I've done in this step is, even though it's usually not the worst idea to turn things into improper fractions, because we haven't found the common denominator, I've actually gone ahead and I've turned the improper fraction into a mixed number and found the common denominator. So I've shown it all in one step here, but if you turn this 56 over 3 into a mixed number, it's going to be 18 2/3, and then that 2/3 I had to get to a common denominator of 12 with the 1/4, which became 3/12, and then you just do the straight subtraction. So subtraction tends to be a little tricky because sometimes you have to do borrowing, and it gets confusing when you're doing borrowing with mixed numbers, but because this problem didn't run into any borrowing trouble, this way of going about the problem just makes things easier. And then one thing I'd like to remind you guys of is always check to see if you can simplify your fractions down before you go through the calculation. So for instance, here in this division problem, once you flip that second term into into its reciprocal, and then you change the division sign into a multiplication sign, you could churn through this math of 32 times 7 and 7 times 16. I don't want to do that. I'm sure you don't want to do that. So instead you can cancel things out by noticing that, if you divide the numerator here and the denominator here by 16, you get a 1 on the bottom and a 2 on the top, and then these two 7s cancel out to give just 1 and 1, and so everything simplifies down to a very nice straightforward calculation that's almost not even a calculation at that point, right? So just those kind of little tips and tricks. If you've got an answer that differs from mine, check with the person next to you. If you guys are still confused, check with me. It's entirely possible that I made a mistake, just because mistakes happen. But yeah, hopefully no issues here. So next we'll move on to a few practice problems involving decimals. So again, I'll give you a few seconds to pause, and then we will look at the answers. All right, so here are the answers to the problems involving decimals. So nothing too straightforward. I haven't gone through the long multiplication and long division just because it's a little difficult to show on the computer, and it would be a lot of work to try and kind of fit all of that information in on screen. So I haven't done that, but I have gone through the calculations and given you the final answer, so you can check if you got those right. If you didn't, then, again, check with the person next to you, check with your teacher, check with me. Maybe I made a mistake doing my addition or subtraction somewhere. Yeah, let me know if you've run into any trouble here or if I've made a typo or something. But that's it for the decimals because I haven't gone through most of the work. And that leaves us with percentages before we go on to the word problems. Now, the first one has been done for you because what I want to highlight here is that we didn't really do this type of practice question with percentages last time. We were just converting percentages to decimals and to fractions because that's what we normally work with when we're doing a question. We'll be using, the question might say percentage, but we'll end up working with a decimal or sometimes a fraction. So the first one is done for you because I want to highlight that if you've got 20% of 30, what you have to do is you have to convert the percentage to a decimal. So the 20% becomes 0.20 as a decimal. You don't even have to write that last zero, but just so you can see that that's, where the 20 is hiding is right there, is in 0.20. And then of, pretty much always in math, but there's probably some exception somewhere that'll come up at some point. But for now, of means multiplication. So you turn this percentage into a decimal, 0.20, multiplication because of, so 0.20 times 30, and then I've given you the answer for that one as well. So you've got these 7 other problems to do, so you can pause and work through them, and then I will show you the answers. So here are the answers that I got to these questions. Again, same as always, if there's any issue, if you think you got it wrong, check with the person next to you first, see if they got an answer that matches, and then maybe you can talk about what you did differently. And if everybody's confused or getting different answers, then let me know. Because, when I do a lot of practice questions, there's always room for typos, and the more questions there are, the more chance there is that a typo has kind of snuck its way into my work. But yeah, so that's it for percentages. Hopefully you guys got all those right, but if not, take a look at, what those around you have done. Try the question again, have a little discussion, and then we can move on to the word problems. So I think there are only 2 word problems. I was going to do 3, but then I opted for 2 and I put 5 on the homework. So you guys will have your work cut out for you on the homework. So here's the first one. There are 2.54 centimeters in an inch. So very useful stuff. A lot of times people will ask, oh, when am I ever going to need this math in real life? Here's an example, converting between metric and imperial units of measurement. So especially, so for me being in Canada, we tend to use the metric system for most things, but for cooking and for like construction work, you'll see imperial measurements a lot of the time. So a lot of measurements for, if you have to go and buy wood, you're doing a construction project, or you've got like, thicknesses of different nails and screws and stuff. Sometimes you'll see those in imperial units, so like inches and fractions of an inch. So really useful question to kind of exercise that side of your brain, thinking about where you might apply this in reality. So there's 2.54 centimeters in an inch. How many centimeters are there in a foot, which is 12 inches? And how many centimeters are there in a yard, which is 3 feet? So you can pause here, work through the problem, and then we will go through the answer. So here's the answer to this question. So because there are 2.54 centimeters in an inch and 12 inches in a foot, all we have to do is take this 2.54 and multiply it by 12. So if you go through that long multiplication, you should get an answer of 30.48 centimeters in 1 foot. Now, if you guys have rulers on you, your 30 centimeter scales, take a look at them. A lot of times, as a kid, you'll look at the ruler and you'll go, oh yeah, 30 centimeters in a foot. Look at your ruler closely, and if you've got the full foot long ruler, 12 inches, 30 something centimeters, 30 and a bit centimeters, you'll actually see that it goes a little bit past 30 centimeters, but almost a full half centimeter more. Like you can almost think of it as 30.5 centimeters in a foot, because that's closer to the actual answer than 30 centimeters. So a lot of times we'll think, yeah, 30 centimeters in a foot. It's actually about 30 and a half, which means that it's going to be, 61 centimeters in 2 feet instead of 60, right? So it starts to add up. So, if you're 5 feet tall, there's a lot of extra half centimeters that you have to account for there. So I like to go through this type of a question because it highlights that point. And then from there, it's pretty straightforward. If you got this answer for the number of centimeters in 1 foot, then because 1 yard is 3 feet, you can just take that answer and multiply it by 3. So you get 91.44 centimeters. So same idea here. If you kind of have it in your head, 30 centimeters in a foot, that means 90 centimeters in a yard, but it's actually 91, almost 91 and a half centimeters in a yard. So there you go. That's the answer to this question. If you had any issues, go back and see how you worked through it. And if there's any other problems, let me know. Otherwise, let's jump into our second and final problem of today's class. So for this one, you want to buy 2 tickets for an event. Could be a concert, could be a sports game of some kind. Each ticket costs $14.80, and you also have to pay a tax of 11% on top of that. So the question is, how much money do you have to pay in total? So 2 tickets plus tax of 11%. So you can take a few seconds, take a few minutes, work through it. I'll give you a few seconds to pause. So here we go. So the first thing that we note is that we're buying 2 tickets. So I've been a little sneaky there, that because it's 2 tickets and I've given you the price of 1, you got to be watchful that your first step is figuring out the price of 2 tickets, right? So we're buying 2 tickets, which is going to be $29.60. That's just this number here times 2, right? So that's before tax. It's $29.60, and then we need to factor in the sales tax of 11%. Now, there are 2 ways to do it. The easier way, in the sense of you're less likely to make a mistake, is you figure out what 11% of this number is, and then you add it on to this total. So you figure out what 11% of 2960 is, and then you add that on to 2960 to get your final answer. The other option, for those of you that are curious, is if your sales tax is 11%, you can save yourself the sort of the second step. Like, you don't have to do the problem in 2 steps if you add 100 to your percentage, because that's going to account for basically making up for that second step where you're adding it back to the total, the amount that you find for your sales tax. When you have to add that back to your total, if you add 100 to your percentage, it takes care of that second step. So for instance, instead of doing 11% of 2960, you could do, so let me say that fully. If you, instead of doing 11% of 2960 and then adding that back on to 2960, you could find 111% of 2960, and that's just your final answer. So if you'd like to do it that way, if you've heard that before, this is your kind of refresher. If this is new to you and you're interested to kind of see it in action, let me know and I'll be happy to throw in an example of that when we're doing our test review. But I just thought I would mention that, but on screen I've just gone through the easier of the 2 ways that's going to cause you less problems. So if you're new, if this is the first time you're seeing this like more than 100% business for saving yourself a step, ignore it. Don't do that, because it's really easy to make mistakes and confuse yourself of whether you've already counted for adding it into the total or whatever. Like, it ends up being a mess. So don't worry about that. Just do it the way that I've done it on screen. So figure out 11% of 2960. So that's 11% as a decimal is going to be 0.11. 29.6, that's the same as $29.60. I've just chopped off that 0 at the end because it doesn't do anything. And that ends up coming out to 3.256. And then you add that back on to your original total of 2960. So you get 32.856. But because we're talking about money, we're talking about dollars, we got to stick in a dollar sign. And then we don't typically talk about parts of a cent. You'll see it on like, for gas stations and stuff. But other than that, you don't really tend to talk about parts of a cent. So we round this up because these last two digits right here, this we've basically said, let's call that, instead of 85.6 cents, let's just call it 86 cents instead. And then that's how we get this answer down here, $32.86. So that's all there is to this question. And this is about the level of complexity that you'll see on the test. So a little bit of work where you're dealing with fractions and decimals at the same time, or decimals and percentages at the same time. We didn't really talk about fractions today because we started there and I wanted to take it slow and really cover a lot for fractions. So I'm hoping you guys are good with fractions, but if you have questions, you've got 2 days, let me know, and I can throw it into something that we do in the test review. And of course, if you've got any questions beyond that, I will try and sort out the time, hopefully by Thursday, if I remember, and if I hear back from your teachers in time. I'll sort out a time for a review session next Monday during school hours, and then I will also have a review session sometime next Monday after school. So sometime in the evening, probably around 6 or 7 o'clock. So that would be, if it's 7 o'clock for you guys, it'll be 6 o'clock for me. But, something like that. Yeah, so that you guys can ask your last questions before the test. So that's it for today's questions in class. So of course that means that now is your opportunity to get started on the homework. So assuming your teachers have that stuff printed out, you can get started on the homework in class, and then you can finish that at home, granted that you still have time in class to work on them, but you do have 2 days to finish them at home, finish those questions. And if there's been some issue with like the printer or something and you don't have access to the homework questions right now, you can start studying for the test and we'll figure something out to get you guys those homework questions so you can practice. So that's everything from my end today. Thank you guys for your attention and your effort. I'm sure you guys are going to do great on the homework and on the test, and I will see you in a couple of days for our test review. Have a good one.